He was elected, actually we'll go back, City Council in 2008 of Rosemount City, and then was elected 37B House of Representatives. I think you took on an incumbent, didn't you?
Incumbent DFL by 15 points.
Yeah, so he won the Minnesota Representative House in 2008, 2010, excuse me. And now 2 years later, here we are, and he's going to take on Amy Klobuchar. So, and he won the endorsement for the state Senate seat at the convention. So, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys for being here. A big day again. If you haven't seen, we are committed to. We've been to many counties. I mean, I can't tell you how some of them we've been to 4 or 5 times, probably more than that. Others we haven't hit yet. But we're now committing ourselves to doing all 87 counties in 36 days. I believe we'll hit 12 already this week. We'll go up towards Crookston and East Grand Forks and Roseau, Thief River Falls this coming weekend. We'll hammer those out. And then and it's just one big tour right now. So every day after first hour, I still teach my class. That's been a big part of why I'm doing this. If you wanted to know why I decided to run for City Council in 2008, it's because of the class that I teach. With teaching American government and politics and economics and advanced placement micro and macroeconomics over the years, I've simply been the guy answering the kids' questions. You know, whether it's, hey, why did my parents lose their house? Can you explain this housing bubble to me? That's 50 minutes. That's not a press conference. You're up there and you're going to answer that kid's question. And hey, I work 20 hours a week, you know, fixing cars, and I'm paying into Social Security, Medicare, and they're saying that it's insolvent. So isn't that just a tax? If they're charging me for those things, you know, so then you go to work and explain the whole Social Security and Medicare system and how it's been manipulated and twisted over the years, and what it started out as and what it is now, and how far that is in debt. Because if you actually took all of our unfunded liabilities, our country's $119.5 trillion in debt. If you actually ran the country like you did a business, if you followed generally accepted accounting procedures. So when you take kids through that and they start to see all these things, it gets to a point where it just breaks your heart. You just have to get involved and do something. So I thought instead of ranting and raving, I'll throw shoes at the TV. I'll get involved, so I ran for city council and won, and that kind of started this whole process. I've signed the term limit pledge. I just simply, I'm a guy who likes to take ground all the time. I think whether it's coaching wrestling or football, I'm not one of those guys. I'm not a big nickel defense guy. You keep playing defense the way you play defense the whole game, and you don't go into protection mode. You keep going forward and advancing the cause, and that's what I'm all about, and that's why I picked the baddest one out of them, I guess Amy is. She has all the money, all the name ID, and everything you could ever hope for if you were an incumbent. And I would have loved to seen her come out. I got a nice flyer in my mailbox this morning. I still teach my first hour class, so went in and checked my mailbox and had a nice flyer in there. I actually have it out in the car, but telling me who to vote for this coming fall. So it was telling me to vote for Amy Klobuchar and Barack Obama, and it was put together by my teachers union and put in my mailbox at school, in my taxpayer-funded mailbox. I carried a bill this last year, got it through the House, that would have prevented them from doing that, because taxpayer-funded equipment is equally the possession of the opponent and proponent of a candidate. It's actually a First Amendment issue, but that's okay. It just so happened that this one, whoever put it in there, circled Amy Klobuchar's name, you know, nice and highlighted, and then put it in there to spike the football for me. But these are the same people who are against bullying, by the way, and preach tolerance to our kids. I have some issues with my teachers union. They don't like me very much, but that's okay. Because Republicans are the party of the teachers, and Democrats are the party of the teachers union, like Chris Christie said. I think that's a very important point. So, yeah. I'd rather just take off and get into questions and see what you have for me. I think you probably know why I'm running, and that is to face the big issues then. If you're going to run for this thing, then we better put somebody forward who's actually going to put forward a plan to solve our budget deficit. We have a lot of big deficits, so let me just rattle through them quickly, and we'll get to questions. So we have a budget deficit That's $1.3 trillion. We've been running $1 trillion deficits year after year after year after year. But we had $1 billion deficits in the 2000s too. So hey, we have to be honest and be able to point out where Republicans and Democrats have overspent, and it can happen. We have our own Republicans who need to be taken to the woodshed every now and then, and I think that has to happen, and I'm just the guy to do it, so I'll look forward to being a part of that process. You have to have a budget, first of all. We haven't had a budget in the United States Senate for 1,251 days, and it looks like we won't have one. Senator Kent Conrad is a Democrat who's been pushing hard for a budget. He's been working the hardest, but Amy hasn't stood up with him. He'd gladly stand up against Harry Reid and put a budget together. He's retiring after this year, but they won't let him. And Harry Reid doesn't want to have a budget because then it would make his members actually expose what they believe. And he doesn't want that. He just wants to win the next election cycle. So having a budget would be a good thing. Putting yourself on some type of plan. Amy thinks that the Budget Control Act is a budget. She, doesn't matter where we go. We've been to 3 forums, but I thought Amy should come here because, I went to Farm Fest. I went to downtown St. Paul to the MPR forum, and I went up to Duluth, that conservative bastion, Duluth, and I did the forum up there. So I think Amy should have to come out and do the Carver-Wright County Senate forum where tomatoes and eggs are handed out and participation is encouraged. So
well, there's no chair. I think that's her.
But no, just kidding. But no, you should be able to come out and campaign everywhere. Not just the places that are your bastion of liberal thought. So and answer those tough questions like the Budget Control Act. Well, what is it? Well, the Budget Control Act is the fiscal cliff. That's what it is. The Budget Control Act doesn't do anything but pull down the spending trend lines. And the spending trend lines in the Budget Control Act are still well above what GDP growth is. So it still has you on a track to be for insolvency. So that's not a plan. So what you have to have is a plan which I back, and I take it on the chin for this plan, but I back the platform to revitalize America. The Ryan plan is a great plan. Congressman Ryan's a great congressman. He's got a good plan on his hands there. I back one that's a little bit more aggressive even. It balances the budget in 5 years, pays off $2 trillion in debt in 10 years, but you got to start shutting down federal agencies in order to do it. Yeah, and I'm not just going to talk like that when it's the endorsement process. That's what I believe. We've so overspent and so overgrown government, folks, that if we don't turn this thing around, you do look at Greece, and you look at what the bond market does when you can't borrow money anymore. And simply put, if you want to start talking about these agencies, that's fine. Let's talk about the Federal Department of Education. I've been a public school teacher for 18 years. It hasn't mattered, No Child Left Behind under President Bush or Race to the Top under President Obama. There hasn't been any value add to my classroom. There's just more unfunded mandates. They don't do anything. Plus, the Department of Education, unless you graduated after 1992, you're not a product of the Federal Department of Education. What have happened to our national test scores? And I'm not talking the ACT and the SAT where all just the smart kids take it. I'm talking everybody, just the kids who are going to college take it. What's been happening to our test scores since the Department of Education? They've been going down compared to the rest of the world. So I think, in my opinion as a public school teacher, you should have the resources as close to the parent, the student, and the teacher as you possibly can. If we're going to take all this money from the federal level, all this made-up mythical money that's either borrowed or printed, and try to mandate how I'm going to teach in my classroom, trust me, I know what happens when you throw more money at education. I get another secondary director of curriculum and formative assessment for red-haired kids who lived east of Highway 3. That's what I get. And they make $150,000 at the district office, and when we go over there for a meeting, they get out the cookies and coffee, and then set out the notepads, and now the teachers go to work and figure out what we're going to do for curriculum and evaluation or whatever they want. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. It's so bureaucratically heavy that you have to get in there and you have to solve these budget issues. You're going to have to pull down the federal workforce. You're going to have to pull it down by at least 15%. Lori, they've added 200. She's added in the last 6 years. She's added 225,000. 200. Yeah, that's Amy's chair. They've added 225,000 federal executive workforce personnel in the last 6 years. I mean, it's a boom town, folks. I mean, you should fly in there. Anybody been to D.C. last few? Okay, did you notice? Trust me, I didn't go to college right away. I got to go to work because I didn't have enough money to go to college. So I went into Labor's Local 464 and built roads and bridges and ripped out freezer units out of Oscar Mayer, seen how hot dogs were made, and removed asbestos and everything. So I know what tower cranes look like, right? Because tower cranes mean jobs. But you go to Washington, D.C., it's all tower cranes. But what are they building? It looks like an anthill they're trying to build so fast.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah, they're building a bureaucracy. They're not putting together, trust me, they're not building things. They're not manufacturing in Washington, D.C. It's going to be IRS agents. It's going to be regulators. It's going to be your independent payment advisory board that's going to run Obamacare and ration health care. And it's going to be lobbyists. Because you got to have a lobbyist to go to D.C. to get your little industry carve out, or your little tax code carve out, or whatever. Or look at that Paul Walzer ad if you've seen it. You know, Paul Walzer, the so-called Republican from the cities, who now backs Amy Klobuchar. Gee, I wonder. I wonder why. It's because she bailed out your industry. You know, he went from a millionaire to a multi-millionaire. That's what this is about, folks. And we've got to straighten up and understand what's really at stake here. This is America versus D.C. I'll tell you one thing. In going around the state and meeting people and talking to people, people don't hate capitalism. People hate what capitalism has become. And what it's become is crony capitalism, where people who have the money enough to buy the interest and the favors and the industry capture and the monopolies go to Washington, and that's what they do. That's what they do. There are good corporations, there are good bankers, there are good unions, and there are good media people in this country. And then there are the elites. It's like a feudal society that lives in D.C. and tries to run the rest of us. And they're bleeding this country dry with what they do. And we need everyday, ordinary people to get involved. We need more teachers and more farmers and more cops and firefighters, small business people, stay-at-home moms and dads, whatever. Whatever we get is better than what we got. The people who should be unemployed are the politicians, Republican and Democrat, who want to sit in Washington, D.C. for their whole career and become millionaires. They've treated elections like winning the lottery. And it's wrong. Anyway, budget deficit, trade deficit, I'm sure I'll get to them all. Savings deficit. But I'd love to answer your questions if you have some. So however you want to do this, if you want to just belt them out, or I mean, we'll get to it all. I mean, I'd rather take it down the road you guys want to go.
Again, if you guys have questions, you pass them this way. And why we have you write them down is that oftentimes there's duplicate questions, and that way, if we can get the question, we can filter them out, and so we can maybe have one question on one topic, and then we get a wider variety of issues to talk about. So if you got questions, pass them this way.
While you're doing that, I can handle. Do you need pen and paper and everything?
Yes. I'll tell you, there's nothing that bugs me more than what Eric Holder is doing, and nobody's standing up to this, or the president that's doing these executive orders. Who is going to have the guts to stand up to the corruption?
Yeah, there's a group of senators, and this is why I'm doing this, and this is why I chose to do this. I just thought, boy, what a perfect time for me is to go and actually meet some of these people, like Senator Jim DeMint. Did you see what Senator Jim DeMint said about the pensions, the federal pensions?
No.
No bailout, because that's what the rumblings are right now, that they're going to do a bailout for the federal pensions instead of correct them. I voted against my own pension reform bill, not my bill, it wasn't my bill, but I say it's my own because I'm a teacher, so I'm in the TRA.